I recently discovered that I have an autoimmune disorder, that my vague suspicions, my random symptoms, they all converge into a reasonable explanation, a simple truth about my body. What's strange, or maybe only strange in hindsight, is that earlier in my life, my academic path took a very specific turn. I was a biologist studying molecular biology. I studied stem cells and cool stuff like that. And then suddenly I found myself immersed in the immune system, particularly in relation to kidney health. We studied a drug that was approved to treat autoimmune disorders, a very particular place to land. I spent years studying how the body decides what belongs, what doesn't, rejection, compatibility, how kidneys regulate, filter, negotiate, survive. At the time, this didn't feel symbolic. It was practical, it was my job. It was interesting, really cool stuff. It's even intuitive. It's really natural for me to understand it. It was with great surprise that I later learned my own body had the remnants of a necrotic kidney, and that now I'm learning this may relate to a host of symptoms related to some autoimmune disorder. Somehow, my own medical story unfolded in a way that braided all of my research together, but retrospectively. Kidneys, autoimmunity, regulation versus attack, belonging versus rejection. And I want to be clear, it didn't feel like some great message from the beyond. It doesn't feel mystical. It feels familiar. It feels like recognition. Like somehow my body's been asking a question for a long time, and my mind went off to study it, and I had no idea why. And it's making me start to think about coincidence differently. Because I think we misunderstand coincidence. We think coincidence has to be rare, to be meaningful, big, improbable, fireworks. But what if the opposite's true? What if the most meaningful coincidences are the ones that happen so often we stop calling them coincidences at all? They're little reflections, patterns that only make sense retroactively, such as who our parents are, or what our siblings do, or what the story of our career is, or our children, where we live. What if all those things are part of big, meaningful coincidences, but because they're wrapped up in our everyday, we can't even see them or notice them as coincidences? We only see the big things, like Edwin Booth saving Abraham Lincoln's son. And that's easy to put into a big cosmic context retrospectively and say there's something weird going on. But aren't the more mundane coincidences of your everyday life much more spectacular? Is that deeply meaningful? Does that mean absolutely nothing? I think it's somehow both at the same time. And I guess that's my point. When these things happen, we do one of two things. We either inflate them into big, meaningful signs, or we just dismiss them completely. I don't think either one of those is quite right. I think we're trying to become aware. I think the awareness we are seeking is a sense of reflection. Reflection that occurs outside of the dimensions of space and time as we currently define them. The idea is that our bodies, our nervous systems, our curiosities, our attention patterns, and our experiences are already coherent before we can explain that. So we're living inside this interrelated reality, trying to understand it, but we're inside of it. So we're drawn to questions that already belong to us, and the meaning shows up really late. But when it does, it feels uncanny, not because it was supernatural, but because recognition collapses time. Past you and present you suddenly make eye contact. Suddenly now you are free to feel this coincidence as deep coherence across time, body, and curiosity. It begins to unfold in the most literal sense in both trivial and profound moments. My life somehow gravitated toward immune system and kidney failure, which later rhymed with my known bodily reality. It's not trivial, but it doesn't require an external grand design. It does allow me the gift of understanding reality as a broad expression of self, and it allows me to consider self to potentially encompass all of me, including my body and my experience. It invites that. I'm open to the questions that come. Did I sense my own fault lines, or did I summon them by deep study? Or does this point to a broad spectrum threading my inner reality to my lived experience? Perhaps all organisms sense their own fault lines, and the body's lead, and our minds and understanding can only follow. I think this is grounded thinking, even if I'm not the most grounded person. Implicit somatic knowledge is an acknowledged concept. Using interoception, we can consciously tap into the information our body gives us about its own health and status. And consciously or not, we all gravitate to what is most personal to us. Even if I didn't know it was personal to me, perhaps there was some drive below the conscious level. But aha, what is that? What is that? What is a drive below the conscious level? Somehow I was studying a system I was already living inside, not because of fate, but because my nervous system tuned into it, I suppose. But what we seem to be describing is an orchestration, like a broad feedback loop that exists in my life. We must conclude logically, even if unremembered, that there was some kind of early sensitivity, which led to curiosity, which led to expertise, and then later experience allowed for recognition. And that meaning that I derive from that recognition is merely that the narrative resolves retroactively. But I suppose that's the whole basis of why I describe reality as a conversation. I'm willing to withdraw that because really the sense we lose in trying to convey these coincidences is the deep meaning we find. So let's allow for it to not have deep meaning. Let it be as trivial as you choose. Trivial and profound actually use the same mechanism. The same process that creates a nothing burger moment also creates a goosebumps moment. Significance. It's not dramatic, it's cumulative. Meaning hides in repetition. And if you're paying attention, reality starts to feel less random and more familiar, not scripted. I think I'll end with this. It's funny, a little dark. I don't want to apply too much meaning to it, but I also studied brain death. It's a very strange thing to study if you think about it. Brain death isn't about absence. It's really about thresholds, definitions, language, trying to decide when something is and isn't, or biology, ethics, medicine, and language all argue with each other. I think that's actually a perfect place to end this. So much of what I'm talking about lives right here in the gap between what we experience and what we can confidently name.